Hello, and welcome to the Natural State Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Anthony Gustin. It is my belief that the natural state of any living organism is health, and that our artificial habitat has forced us into having artificial health problems. This show is my attempt to dive deep and learn about using nutrition, sleep, movement, relationships, and more to help you reclaim your natural state of health in a modern world and show you how to thrive in an environment that's stacked against you. If you enjoyed today's show, you can find out more details and information at dranthonygustin.com. Today, I welcome back Chris Irvin, my co-author of Keto Answers and semi-frequent co-host of this podcast, to do another Q&A episode. And we dive in deep today on some of you guys' questions. Questions like, can keto be used as a long-term lifestyle? We get a lot of this one. Is it bad to do long-term? Should you only be doing it in stints? Should you be doing it cyclically? So we tackle that one. How the muscles get energy in low carb, what you should be thinking of for electrolyte deficiencies, how you should be reintroducing carbohydrates, when you're drinking, how to stay in ketosis, questions about coffee, carnivore, rice, us writing another book, and then a special one for the end for you long-term listeners out there. So tune into this one. I hope you guys enjoy. As always, if you have more questions, just go ahead to our social media accounts. Usually you can reach us more on Instagram. So that's Dr. Anthony Gustin and the Ketologist on Instagram. Send us a question and we'll likely get it into another episode of a Q&A. Before we get to the episode, I wanted to chat about our sponsor, Perfect Keto. Perfect Keto is all about making a ketogenic diet healthy and accessible. Whether you're reading all of our online guides or articles or enjoying Perfect Keto's exogenous ketones or any other keto-friendly products, everything you need to make keto work for you is at perfectketo.com. I know what you're thinking. Hey, aren't you the founder of Perfect Keto? Yep, that's right. And all of my insanely high standards have been put into making each and every product. My background as a functional medicine clinician helps me craft the cleanest and healthiest possible products and the best information about a ketogenic diet. Head on over to perfectketo.com to learn anything you need to know about the ketogenic diet. And if you've never tried any of our products before, feel free to use the code KETOPODCAST for 20% off your first order. With that being said, let's get into the show. Chris, the people have spoken. They wanted you back for another Q&A episode.
So soon, too. We must have had a good one.
I know. It was actually talking about the farm stuff last episode. I think was 9.
Yeah.
Q&A 9 was the most feedback I think I've ever gotten from a podcast.
Really? Good feedback or bad feedback?
Good feedback. Just me talking about the farm stuff and asking for pointers and help with how to not be such an idiot. It was good. People are really helpful. It's one of these things, man, where I keep looking about trying to find truth in the world and like how we can help you make people healthier. And I keep seeing this with these communities. Like the further you dig, it seems like everybody is just so great that's involved in it. So for instance, like the sports med world, Chiro world, when I was getting going, is really encouraging and great. But I don't know, still like everyone was kind of in it for themselves to some degree with their clinics. And then like going in the paleo community, people were amazing. Keto, same thing. Like I think regenerative ag, farming and stuff is like just taking it to another level. Just so many things are integrated and people are so amazing. So I'm really grateful to see the sort of the support already from tons of strangers that I'd never even met before. That's been awesome.
Yeah, that was actually one of my favorite episodes that we've done together too, just because one, it was cool. You answered a lot of questions that I actually had. And I think it's a pretty fascinating topic too. You've been pointing a couple of resources my direction. I'm actually reading Food Fix right now from Mark Hyman. So like all of those topics have been like just really hitting me in the face lately. So that was a really fun podcast to do.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of work, man. It's a lot of work to figure this stuff out. And it's really expensive. It's far more expensive than I had realized. And it's like to fucking buy a tractor and stuff now, like all this weird stuff like I wasn't expecting. And I'm just like putting my money where my mouth is. It's like, this is important to me. I want to learn about it. So I'm going to do it. I just think it's like one of these things where I don't think a lot of people will say they support it and like it, but yeah, I'm probably going to regret it at some point, at many points, but for now it's been exciting. But
yeah, it's one thing to support it and like it, and it's another thing to actually live it. So
try, man. Cool. Let's get into it.
Let's go through it though, because I want to see, I feel like you're going to be so good at sharing a lot of the information that you learn, and it's going to be a great outlet for other people who want to do the same thing. I mean, I've been getting people hitting me up on social media as well, just like talking about how they're getting into the regenerative farm stuff and they've been following the stuff that you're doing and everything. So hopefully it'll be a great resource for those people too.
Yeah, I mean, it's for sure the sort of like the next layer of health, in my opinion. Because people should keep digging. Like it's just a consistent thing that I've seen other people from many different fields converge on this, and that's sort of like what I saw with paleo, what I saw with keto, people from like different arenas, like, oh, this makes sense. Let's get interested in this. So I think it's like sort of in the early stage, but it'll pop in the next couple of years. Cool. Let's jump into the questions here.
All right. So first question that we got is, what are your thoughts on keto as a long-term / lifestyle?
Yeah. Did we cover this in the book? I don't remember. It's been so long, man.
I think our opinion may have changed though from what's in the book, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, with all this stuff, I mean, I tend to think that keto is a tool in nutrition and just one of many that you can use. And it just totally depends on your goals. A lot of these questions with nutrition always for me fall back to, it depends. It depends on your goal. It depends on how you're doing. It depends on what season it is. It depends on what access you have to certain foods. Like it depends on a lot of different things. And I think that it can be totally fine long-term. And there's certain populations where it's probably not great with, and people maybe don't respond very well long-term. But if you look at sort of seasonally throughout history, people probably had access to carbohydrates in the summer months, especially late summer, and probably went keto for winter, and it sort of ebbed and flowed. But the thing is, like, we're sort of at a point where some people have a metabolic history where they're so broken and so damaged, and they have diabetes and their pancreas is so messed up that they'll never be able to produce insulin again. It's like people like that, they may need to do it for an indefinite period of time, or people treating another condition. And so if that's the case, then I would say, like, if you want to be healthy, you kind of have no choice if you're metabolically broken so much. But like someone like you or I, who, I mean, you've been far healthier in your life than I have even. And I would say that, there's sometimes where it fits really well for me. And sometimes I eat a bunch of carbs and I feel totally fine as well. So it totally depends. What are your current thoughts on this?
So I think that like keto, the way that we recommend it, which I think is kind of important, that's like different from the way that like the mainstream recommendations have gone the last few years. But I feel like keto, the way we recommend it, has a lot of like broad nutritional principles that are pretty good for long-term things. Things like eating more protein, eating healthy fats, keeping your carbohydrate intake low, eating whole foods. All of those things I think are general principles that can make up a long-term lifestyle solution. I think like strict ketogenic diet, less than 30 grams of carbs, being in focusing on ketone levels and being in ketosis, I think is a goal specific approach. I think that it's really great for people who have a lot of fat to lose or who are looking to optimize fat loss. And then obviously some of the therapeutic implications for it, I think, are great. But that's kind of the way that I look at it. I feel like if we're talking about keto, like the term, the ketogenic diet, then I don't think it's necessarily something that everybody has to be on forever. I think that it's a tool they can use when they need to get the benefits that come with being in ketosis. But generally speaking, there's a lot of things that come with a ketogenic approach that are just good lifestyle principles to follow.
Yeah. I mean, I think you make a good distinction that the way we recommend it is usually a little bit differently than how most people do it. And let's just focus on real food. And if people, you can do it much longer. You feel way better if you just eat real food. And I think that ultimately, if you're eating locally, eating real food, you're going to eliminate a lot of carbohydrates throughout the year anyways.
Yeah. And I feel like that's probably going to be enough for a lot of people out there. Like, like you said, unless you fall into that category of being extremely insulin resistant, pre-diabetic, very obese, anything like that, then you probably fall into the category that needs to be hyper focused on carbohydrate intake and really needs to be like in ketosis, going low carb. Going extremely low carb. But for anybody else who's, either gotten to like a steady weight, they've experienced their weight loss, or they're a little bit more metabolically healthy, then just taking that, like, eating locally, eating real foods approach is going to probably get you, enough of the way there that you don't have to maybe focus as much on, keeping carbs below 30 grams and monitoring ketone levels and things like that.
It's a good point. All right. Next question.
All right. Next question we have is, if I'm in low carb, how do my muscles get energy? Does my liver make glucose from fat?
It gets it from the sun.
Photosynthesis.
Yeah. So yes, your liver can make glucose from fat. I mean, just as like, that's the case. There's also, when you burn fat, your muscles can also use amino acids for energy, fatty acids for energy, glucose for energy. Your glucose doesn't go to zero when you're on a low carb diet. So it's like, there's plenty of available fuel sources. It's kind of like a very short answer to it. You probably have a much better in-depth one than that.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that they're asking this question because they're probably thinking that the muscles can really only use glucose for energy. So they're wondering if we're not eating carbohydrates, where the energy is going to be coming from. So the distinction you just made, I think, is important. Is that when you start on a low carb diet, we see a shift in our fuel utilization to other sources, and that's fat and ketones. When we're doing it the right way, hopefully not muscle. There's definitely a wrong way you can follow the diet that will make you rely on muscle proteins, but if you're doing it the right way.
What is that?
Well, in my opinion, I think the
high fat, low protein.
Yeah, low protein and low calorie.
Yikes, that sucks.
Yeah, definitely. So I think that that's and that's when it comes to that, we know that your body can transition to a different fuel source, so no problems there. And then in terms of like glucose, like you mentioned, our body does have the ability to produce glucose through non-glucose substrate through a process known as gluconeogenesis, which you have a history of making fun of me on that one. I think I said it right that time.
I think you usually go gluconeogenesis.
Yeah, that's what I used to say, but then you embarrassed me on a podcast.
National television.
Yeah, I'll never forget it now.
Gluconeogenesis is hey, potato. It's all good here.
But yeah, so this process exists. It gets us glucose still. Some of that does come from fat. So we know that process, it takes some of the amino acids from protein, and then also the glycerol backbone from fat that we're burning. So the second part to that question says, does my liver make glucose from fat? Technically, yes. Fat does contribute to that. So your muscles are getting plenty of energy. There's a lot of research out there from some great people like Folick and Finney, and those guys have shown that athletes are still able to perform very well in a low carb state. And that's because of this transition in fuel utilization. So no worries about dying while you're exercising if you're low carb.
Great. That's good news.
Good news. You can live and exercise.
I have been back on the Perfect Keto pre-workout, not as a plug or anything. It was just like I've been using it a lot the last couple of weeks because I've been more low carb going into colder months. Cold as in 80 degrees in Austin.
Yeah.
But I've been feeling amazing. Like I was feeling a little sluggish when I first transitioned, but been feeling great going through workouts now. It's just a little bit of extra. So like, I think there's points where like you're sort of switching your fuel states again, that like adding in ketones, MCT, things like that can be beneficial. BCAAs are in there as well. Can be beneficial as you sort of like switch your engine over again.
For sure. I feel like fasted workouts in the morning with a little bit of ketones is incredible for like just getting a big boost in energy, and like not even just like energy for the workout, but also just like the mental component of it. Like I feel like you get a little bit more locked in when you have some ketones, and you can kind of push it a little bit further. Like you're in a little bit better of a mood when you're going through your workout. I kind of like that part of it.
All right. Let's go to the next one. I think it's somewhat related.
Yes. So can magnesium deplete within 4 days of starting keto and give full body cramps / fatigue?
It's kind of a weird question. I would say unlikely that magnesium is the culprit of depleting in 4 days, leading to full body cramps and fatigue. What say you?
I think that like if they're asking, is it possible to experience like electrolyte deficiency within 4 days of keto? Yes. You can definitely dump a ton of water when you first start keto, and that can lead to like some electrolyte imbalances. I wouldn't say that it's just magnesium. It's probably going to be, magnesium, sodium, potassium. It's a system. They all work together. They all influence the absorption of the other one and how our body uses it and things like that. So I think it's probably all of those things. But I'd say that like getting the full body cramps and fatigue, kind of more on the rare side. Like, you might hear people getting some leg cramps when they first start if they don't use some electrolytes or drink some water. And experience maybe some fatigue too. But like this question kind of makes it sound like it's a little bit more drastic than that. Like full body cramp seems kind of intense. So I'm kind of thinking maybe something else going on there. Could be severe dehydration, but I don't know. Have you seen anything else like that?
I have not. That sounds intense.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just like a well-rounded electrolyte product, especially when you're transitioning again, is going to do a lot of good. I mean, once insulin drops, you start excreting a lot of electrolytes. So getting them back in, again, it's like the drastic shift going from eating tons of carbs your entire life to not eating carbs is like, I wouldn't say it's like extreme on the body, but you're going to have a lot of physiological shifts that you're not used to having. And so like some people, it's like, oh, well, we shouldn't, if this is a natural state, should we be having supplement so much? It's like, there's a lot of reasons why supplementation is a good idea. And I think that this is like a key example of time where adding in some electrolytes can be so helpful on so many different fronts, especially if you're just transitioning, or even like again, like I've been in and out of ketosis probably hundreds, if not thousands of times. And I sort of like have these strategies I use for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like, like you said, supplements are definitely something not something we want to like depend on, but in this case, especially when you're first starting the diet, that drastic shift that you get might cause for you to have to do that. I would also say that outside of just electrolyte supplementation and water is maybe focusing on calorie consumption too. A lot of people actually undereat when they first start keto just because of some of that satiety that's happening with, especially if they were coming from like a lower protein, lower fat diet, they're probably experiencing a lot of satiation transitioning to like a keto diet. So making sure that you're getting enough calories in. And I talk to a lot of people who are, doing keto, eating like 1,200 calories, working out like 5 days a week. That's just going to be pretty tough on the body and definitely going to leave you fatigued and with some body cramps. So you want to make sure that you're fueling your body appropriately.
Good point. All right, moving on.
All right, next question. How to reintroduce carbs into diet to stay in ketosis and take advantage of metabolic flexibility.
We did an entire podcast on this one, right? I think that was Q&A episode 7, I believe.
Okay.
We linked to it in the show notes. But yeah, we went all into this because like early in the year, we both started eating a lot of carbohydrates. And so
we were crushing some pancakes and stuff. It was crazy.
Yeah, tons. Just donut long johns every day. Amazing. Yeah, I would say it's like start with real food. This is, again, my biggest thing. I think a lot of people think carbs. They think, okay, carbs equal this processed shit I was eating before. So introducing carbs back again is going to like lead to that again. And this is where I think putting on a blood glucose meter and testing out different real food carbohydrate sources, which is going to change over the course of like after you get back to using carbohydrates again. But if you've been off carbs for a while and reintroducing them back in, it's like, I guess the question to stay in ketosis and take advantage of metabolic flexibility, it's like, I would say, like, what is the goal here? Again, like it depends. Like, why are you trying to get both ketosis and have carbohydrates? Like, you don't necessarily need both of them. I mean, you could implement carbohydrates around workouts. You could do them probably later in the day, like only in one meal, more fasting, especially in the morning, fasted workouts. Like all these things will promote sort of a balance between ketosis and carbohydrate consumption, and like also just like not overeating carbs.
Right.
So if you eat carbs, eat 70, 100 grams maybe a day, not 300 grams a day. Like these are all the things that I think of. What about you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel like you said, what's the goal for why you're doing this? So if you're reintroducing carbs, then it's probably because you're trying to use those carbs as an energy source. So I don't think using them with the goal of staying in ketosis really makes much sense. Like essentially you're trying to, if you're using these carbs, you're trying to replace ketosis with you using carbs for energy, which has its strategic, and there's times to use that strategically. I think that's fine. So if, I think the refined version of this question should be, how do you reintroduce carbs to maintain metabolic flexibility so that you can easily cycle back into ketosis? I think would be a better approach. And with that, I think, like you said, eating whole food carbohydrates is really important. Nobody got metabolically unflexible through eating whole food carbs. They got it from eating processed carbs that, not only with the carbs contributing to the problem, but the refined seed oils that are in it as well. So, if you're trying to reintroduce carbs by eating pizza and donuts, like we just joked about and stuff like that, probably not a really great way to do that. But if you're talking about, whole food carbohydrates that you're doing, like you said, strategically around your workouts, that's going to allow you to, whole food carbohydrate sources don't contain a lot of carbs. It's hard to overeat those. So you're probably going to be eating them in an amount that's going to allow you to maintain some metabolic flexibility so that you can cycle back into ketosis when you're, trying to go between those two different fuel sources.
Yep. And make sure that, again, making like when you test, if you have a blood glucose monitor, that it's not a carbohydrate that you react to and just completely ruins your blood glucose, which if you were to compare, for instance, my fiance and myself, like we have different responses to the same exact whole foods. And so that's important to look at your own metabolic response to certain foods.
For sure. Yeah. And I feel like, we can talk about levels a little bit too. They're one of the companies that we've been using right now that has a really great, it's continuous blood glucose monitor. They have a pretty good app that allows you to kind of track these things. But through using, even within like our Perfect Keto team, we've seen some pretty dramatically different responses to things. I know, like, I think it was Cunny who was talking about how he was having big spikes in his blood sugar from eating like sweet potatoes, whereas like I eat sweet potatoes and I get no spike. So I think it's definitely important to figure out what sources are working best for you. If that's not an investment that you want to make, then I think like the general principle of just sticking with whole food versions of carbs is probably going to be enough. But the more testing you can do, the better you can figure it out.
Yes, sir.
All right. Next question we got is keto mixers and cocktails, ideas for making drinking easier.
Yeah.
So what do you do to get drunk?
So I actually started this year not drinking for, I don't know, 6 months. And then it's one of these things that just like creeps in your life.
Yeah.
For me, at least. And then it's like drinking a little bit more lately, but and like, I think I wanted to put this question here because I know a lot of people are probably going to be faced with this at holiday times. Mm-hmm. And the easiest thing is really just to stick to like a low carb, like a really dry wine. Mm-hmm. Or just hard alcohol that's high quality. That's why I like mezcal just on ice. But when it comes down to it, like still trying to limit your alcohol consumption is always good. It's like there's no drop of alcohol. It's better than 0 drops. And so it's a neurotoxin. It's not good for you. But I realize people are human and they have social experiences where they drink. And so, yeah, that's kind of my strategy. Is like if I drink wine, I don't drink more than 2 glasses, period. So anything more than that, I feel like shit, no matter what quality of wine I drink, even if it's dry farm, high quality stuff, natural wines, I don't feel good after that much. If I drink hard alcohol, I drink it straight up. And it's like that. If it's so gross that you don't like drinking it straight, then you probably have really terrible quality liquor anyways. Right. As far as mixers, people can also do something like a White Claw-esque type of thing, which is like very low carb. So, there's like 5 million different seltzer companies. Yeah. What's nice about those is that you can actually look at the vast majority of them have a nutrition facts panel, which almost all alcohol does not, including wine. And I did a podcast with Todd White, who was the owner of Dry Farm Wines. He talks about like the lack of labeling in the alcohol industry is shocking. And there's 30, 40, 50 different ingredients, preservatives, artificial colorings, GMO yeast, et cetera, in wine. And so what's nice about the hard kombuchas, hard seltzers, things like that, there's an ingredient list on there. You can actually see what weird shit is in this product. What is the carb count? How much extra sugar do they put in there? So it's really easy to sort of like be a little bit more choosy with those products. If I drink, I like a beer a year. And if I do, I think mine this year last year was with you with those Omission low carb IPAs, gluten-free low carb IPA. And it's actually like pretty damn good. Like when it gets ultra hot in Austin and I'm out like doing yard work and sweating it off, I'm just, sometimes just a nice ice cold, low carb, gluten-free beer does the trick. So that's the case. You can do that. You can do Zevias, which are stevia. Like I had Patty on as the CEO. That is actually one of the first podcasts we did. They're a great company. Their stuff is sort of like traditional soda flavors, but no junk in there. So that's an option too if you're like really fiending for a Jack and Coke or something like that. What is your approach currently?
So if I'm doing like mixers and stuff, that's what I do is try to find like a healthy alternative to like, I don't really like using Coke and stuff like that. There's a ton of, even like, I know a lot of people.
Diet Coke is like just awful. It tastes like shit too.
And there's just so much garbage in it too. So I try to more like stick to something like you said, like a Zevia or one of these like cleaner soda alternatives. But I'm kind of more of like an on the rocks guy, or like I'm a whiskey guy personally. So I like either whiskey on the rocks or making like a low sugar old fashioned. Like I'll actually use some like monk fruit instead of sugar in it, and then put in get some like low. You can find bitters that don't have much sugar in them, stuff like that. So that's usually what I'll do. But definitely trying not to drink too much is a pretty big one. Because obviously, like you said, alcohol in any amount is going to be toxic. So it's not great for us. So just trying to like keep it to like enough to like, I like the social aspect of it. Like when you're out with a group of people, I like having a couple of drinks. It kind of loosens you up a little bit. I think there's a lot of benefits to being, a little bit more open and able to have good conversations and stuff. So I like that side of it, but obviously getting to the point of like being extremely drunk is not going to be good regardless of how clean your alcohol is. So I think it's just kind of like limiting how much you're drinking. But I will admit I am a beer guy, and I actually do like beer. And when it comes to drinking beer, if I am going to have a beer, I'm not really looking at health on it. If I'm going to drink a beer, I'm going to drink a beer I enjoy, which is usually like a porter or a stout, some sort of like dark beer. That's kind of like my guilty pleasure of thing that I'm not really going to focus on, the quality as much there.
You're about to get canceled, man.
I know, right? Got to be honest with it though, right? I don't want anybody walking up on me in a brewery sometime and I got a big old porter in my hand and they're wondering what's going on.
Well, good thing you can disclose it here.
All right.
Speaking of vices, our next question.
Oh yeah. Did Carnivore for 6
No, we missed one. So there, yeah.
Oh yeah. Is there such a thing as too much coffee?
I'd say absolutely. I mean, it's technically another drug. I mean, I'm going to sound very lame in this one. It's like, kids don't drink or don't drink coffee, don't dance. It's like,
thanks, Grandpa.
Yeah. I mean, I go on and off coffee. Now it's like 95% of the time I'm not drinking caffeine. Again, it slips in on a vacation or whatever, I start drinking it. It's so habitual. Yeah. It's like I wake up and I do this thing. But absolutely. I mean, I just feel way better not drinking caffeine. It's just like, I want high energy all the way through the day. And whenever I drink coffee, like it's not the case. Like I feel like I'm sort of like robbing Peter to pay Paul kind of thing, where like I feel great for like 4, 5, 6 hours, and then I feel like shit later in the day. So for me, it's just not worth it. And that's even after like I have one espresso and I'm like that. And I think it's also I have a lot of other inputs in my life and like just sort of burning hot right now. So that's the case. Like if I was not working so hard, I wouldn't notice it as much, but it's still going on in the background. So it's just like one of these things where it's a substance that alters your brain chemistry. Mm-hmm. Like I don't know. It's like to avoid that more often than not, personally. But it's like, yeah, I mean, classic thing. Too much coffee, of course. Like look at people who drink a shitload of it and like how anxious and jittery they get. Like absolutely, there's such a thing as too much coffee.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, too much, definitely. We can develop a tolerance to it. We can make it so it doesn't really affect us as well. We have to increase the dose to get benefits out of it. So I definitely think having too much is not a great thing. I think that, and there's also a lot of stuff out there about caffeine really promoting like aging too. Like if we have like chronic addiction to high amounts of caffeine, that's just going to accelerate the aging process. So also not something that we want to do. But I also think that like sourcing is important with coffee, because thinking about like, I actually think coffee nowadays is very similar to like the concept with marijuana as well, where it's like marijuana used to be a plant that had like a lot of these other compounds in it. It was like lower THC. It had some of these other terpenes and the CBD and all the other cannabinoids and things like that made it a good product. And now like all products are just like high THC and none of that other stuff. And I feel like that's happening a lot now with people's caffeine consumption and coffee consumption is like they're consuming beans that have been like crossbred to have like high amounts of caffeine, but like low amounts of things like theanine and these other compounds that can come with coffee that kind of offsets the effect of caffeine. So I think that like that's kind of important. Like if you want to drink,
I've never heard this before.
Yeah, I mean, like wait, which part of it on the coffee side?
Like we've like selected coffee to have more caffeine and less of these other things.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that happens in like the coffee, like in coffee farming, but then also think about the coffee products that are out there now. Like there's a lot of like RTD coffee things that are basically just a shit ton of caffeine, and there's none of that extra stuff that you get with like, especially the theanine, right? So like theanine kind of offsets some of the effects of caffeine. It kind of blends really well with caffeine. It calms you out a little bit. It prevents you from getting like your heart rate super elevated. So like not having any of that and just having high doses of caffeine is definitely going to have a different effect than having like a more natural coffee bean. So I feel like that's another big thing. But for anybody out there who is consuming too much caffeine or too much coffee, I think one of the best tips that I can give is to push your coffee intake back, not have it first thing in the morning. So when I was in grad school, I had like a massive caffeine addiction. I had like this crazy schedule where I was like personal training from like 5 to 8 in the morning. I was working in a lab from like 9 to 5. And then I was personal training again from like 5 to 10 at night. So I was like, and that was like 6 days a week. So I had this like crazy schedule. I was consuming a ton of caffeine basically from the time I woke up until the time I went to bed. And I started doing more research into like circadian rhythms and stuff like that, and found out how, having coffee first thing in the morning, caffeine, it can suppress some of your natural waking mechanisms, and then basically makes it so you're relying on caffeine. And as we get more tolerant to that caffeine, we start metabolizing it quicker, and we have to increase our reliance on it, right? So if you can like not have it first thing in the morning, which can definitely be a big adjustment for people who are accustomed to starting their day like that, then you can let your body kind of go through its natural waking mechanism. And then if you can wait to have your coffee till like, 11 or 12, then, that can really carry you through the rest of the day. And you may find that you don't need it again. So you can really limit your consumption down to like 1 cup a day by just making that slight change. So I feel like it's a big problem out there. Like, anytime you drive by like a Starbucks, it's like all times of the day, there's a line, out into the street of people going there. And that's, I feel like, just a sign of like our country's caffeine addiction. So definitely something to think about.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to kill you, but it's like, yes, there's such a thing as too much coffee. That's my answer.
Right.
They can do it.
It's probably not the biggest lever that most people need to pull in their health, but for you guys that are going the extra 1%.
If you're drinking like a pot a day, you're having like or a quad shot daily, like I'd say you're pushing it. It's like there's no need for that. You can also go to decaf too. Like I drink decaf now, not every single day, but I'll drink that, no problem.
Yeah.
Like if you do that.
You have to have a Bang energy drink to start your day with 400 milligrams of caffeine in it. You're probably
120 milligrams of methamphetamine.
Yeah.
What the hell's in that stuff?
It's horrible. All right. And since we did back-to-back questions on alcohol and coffee, try not to mix your uppers and downers.
Or if you want to have a really good time. I was kidding. I have no experience with that. All right. Next question.
All right. Next question. Did carnivore for 6 months and can't digest anything now. Should I eat only meat or try to incorporate more foods?
This is one of the things about carnivore diet that I don't know. It can be a good tool, in my opinion, to get people to get like a baseline, a little bit of a reset.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can't go from eating only meat to back eating food again without feeling like crap, like your body's just not resilient. Like you aren't a resilient human.
Right.
And we've shown throughout all of human history that humans should be able to tolerate food, like from all sources, plants, animals, etc. If you only want to eat animal products, that's totally fine. I have no problem with that. But you should be able to eat plant foods. That's like the same thing where if you, for instance, like you're really good at squatting, but you can't run. Like you don't have to run to be fit, but you should be able to. The same sort of thing with physical health, with nutritional health as well. Like your gut should be able to, and your body should be able to metabolize plant foods if you eat them, period. So it's a problem. And I think that if you are at a point where you can't digest anything after eating carnivore, like there could be some things where you just reintroduce foods over a slow period of time, or you could have more serious gut problems that you need to address before you start adding things back in.
Yeah.
I know you're working on a big carnivore plan, so curious to hear what you think about this one.
Yeah, so I definitely agree that like I'm with you that I think the optimal human diet is including both plants and meat. I think that like there are people out there who, and probably a lot of people out there who can benefit from temporarily removing plants from their diet because of over consuming them and having like an altered gut microbiome, having too many of those anti-nutrients that come in a lot of plants. So I think that like going carnivore for a short period of time can alleviate some of those things. But, we don't have research on, long-term carnivore dieting. And I think that like it makes sense that doing the diet long-term is probably going to change your gut microbiome in a way that's not going to be conducive of metabolizing plants very well after that or digesting plants very well after that. So, I think a better approach to that, which is, you mentioned the program, me and Christy, I have a hard time pronouncing her last name, Storchuk. She is another researcher that worked with me on making a carnivore reset program that is, essentially using the carnivore diet for like 30 days to reset your gut and then start reintroducing foods after. So it comes with like a reintroduction program to slowly reintroduce foods afterwards so that you can, start to repopulate your gut microbiome with the bacteria and the things needed to the enzymes and all these things to digest these foods. So I think that if like 6 months, that's a long time to go. And to go from 6 months to, right back to introducing a ton of plant foods back into your diet, I think that's going to be probably a reason why you're going to have problems with digesting it. So I think this like, a shorter term carnivore approach with like a slow introduction of the right plant sources after that is probably going to be more beneficial.
Yeah. When's your program releasing, by the way?
So it's actually out right now. So it's available right now on my website, theketologist.com. So there's some people going through it now. There's a little Facebook group that supports it. But after Thanksgiving, going to be doing actually like a kind of a bigger program that's going to include a little bit more like coaching in the Facebook group. So, people can join it now, or if they're looking for a little bit more of like a hands-on approach, then they can get that around like Thanksgiving time. That's going to be coming out.
Sounds good. All right.
Sweet. Next question that we got. Thoughts on white or jasmine rice for metabolically healthy people?
I have no problem with it. I think it's like the same answer as before. Test it. Do you feel good about it? Yes or no? Does your body respond well metabolically? Or do you have crazy blood sugar spikes? Like there's just one way. Also, do you feel good afterwards? Yes or no? Like some people, we're talking about carnivore. Some people don't do well on a lot of plant foods. Like, do you have skin stuff that flares up by eating rice? Yeah. And I was talking to Paul about this, Paul Saladino. Mm-hmm. He's still been trying to like get stuff in, like carbs in, carbs out. He tried rice a couple of years ago, flared up his psoriasis or something like that. He had some sort of eczema or psoriasis that was flared up. Was off carbs for a while, then ate honey for a while. Now he's eating rice again and feeling great. So changes. So you're, like you said before, gut microbiome changes, things change, tolerance to processing these food changes over a long period of time. So does it align with your goals, and do you feel good eating it? And does your body process it well? If all those things say yes, then great, go ahead.
Do you think that nutritionally there's a big difference between white and jasmine rice?
I mean, isn't jasmine a white rice?
I don't know. I don't eat any rice. It spikes all of it spiked my blood sugar when I've tested it. And I'm not a huge fan of like supporting rice farming from like an environmental perspective. So I actually have no idea.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that jasmine is a white rice. Like white rice is a category of rices. Jasmine is one strain of white rice is how I understand it. I could be wrong. I don't know. I'm not a rice expert, but that's how
Say that.
That's how I think it is categorized, but could be wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like regardless, your point there about like testing is going to be crucial, because I've heard a lot of people say that like, white rice, which we kind of we usually consider to be like the higher glycemic version of rice. I've heard so many people say doesn't spike my blood sugar, does spike my blood sugar. So, testing is going to be pretty important.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I don't know if this person really means this, but like what I'd be interested in is like, do they mean, like, is there any curiosity around brown rice? There's a lot of people who think brown rice is better because it's less processed. And the thing with plant foods, why people do carnivore diets, because they think, okay, there's these things in plants that are defense mechanisms. And in rice, we have a process to remove both so it's like you have the kernel of rice, which is the white, quote unquote, white rice. And you have the rice bran in the hull on the outsides. There's a white rice germ, which is a separate thing entirely. So removing the hull and the bran, you're left with white rice, but like all of those things in rice that you might respond to negatively from, let's say, a response to certain anti-nutrients or plant toxins, that's all removed with going from brown to white. So I think if you eat white rice, you should probably go with a white strain, personally.
Yeah. Okay. And just to throw it out there too, for, we had the last episode talking about, voting with your food dollars and things like that. Rice farming is actually one of the largest contributors to methane production. So just throwing it out there, it might be better to find a better alternative to that anyway, if that's something that you care about supporting.
From what aspect?
What do you mean?
So is it a cyclical methane production? Does growing new rice pull back in methane to the soil or anything like that? I don't know anything about rice farming.
Oh yeah. That's a good question. I'm not sure. I think it's like from the production stand. I was under the impression that it was more of like causing like that there was no sequestering of greenhouse gas emissions in the soil occurring from rice farming. So I think it's all like producing new emissions, but I'm not 100%.
Yeah, because like this is the big thing about beef, for example, and people think, oh, cow farts are leading to methane that goes in the atmosphere. It's like, well, this is a cyclical thing where that also then goes back into the soil and the cow eats it. And it's just like it's a cycle. I mean, it's like goes down to another thing in general, where I tend to think eat locally. Most people in the US are not going to be having access to a lot of rice if they eat locally.
Yeah.
I mean, some in the South, like I know Louisiana has some rice and things like that. It's a little more swampy, but most of the country does not have access to rice.
Yeah.
That's just like, again, looking at it from a health angle, looking at it from like supporting your local community, looking at it from just, not having to put so much energy in the system. Even if rice was the best health food and it was made in China or Japan and Asia and then shipped over here, like rice is heavy.
Yeah.
And it's like that energetic cost from getting it from one place to another, and the dependency on another country we've seen through this year is probably not a good idea. So it's like, how can you promote local food systems and have a little bit more food security locally, people that's more so like also why I really eat rice, because it doesn't fall. It's not where I go buy groceries at a farmer's market and local farms. Like it's not there, so I don't buy it. I don't eat it.
Yeah, agreed. Yep. All right, you want to move to the next question?
Let's do it.
All right. Will you write another book?
Ooh, I wonder if this is directed towards me and you, or me or you.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah. I would say I have a lot of ideas. I think I've run some by you around where I think books need to be written.
Mm-hmm.
However, I don't have the time currently. I mean, like the first one was, I think it'd be way easier now doing it again. Then you do the first one, but man, it is a lot of work. It's way more work than I thought. Like the actual writing process is not the work to me. It's like getting in a cohesive flow that like people are engaged and want to read front to back, and like organizing ideas over a long period of time. That's the tricky part. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of books that need to be written that nobody else is writing right now. There's a lot of ideas I have about health, my framework around health. Like I think that could be valuable. I think that there should be a book about vegetable oil, mass marketed. Well, why doesn't that exist? I have no idea. Like I think we're also like talking earlier about sort of shifts towards regenerative agriculture. I think there's another shift that we'll see in the next 15 years that we'll look back on vegetable oil, hopefully 15, 20 years, sort of like how we look back on margarine and trans fats now. They're absolutely toxic. And there's like some blog posts around, like there's no like definitive text on here's why they're bad and here's what an alternative is. Here's how pervasive they are. Here's how they cause chronic disease. Here's all the evidence around that. So somebody wants to help me write that one, I would be down for that one. But it's just a lot of work. And I'm running several businesses right now, and I just got a farm, and there's like trying to be a real human with friends and family as well. It's like it's tough to squeeze in more book writing. But yeah, I'd be down for that. I'd say no time soon. What about you?
Yeah, so I'm always going to be writing another book. Writing is something that I really enjoy. It's something that kind of makes up like the start of my day in the morning. I like to get into some deep work on some writing projects right when I wake up. So I'm working on one now, and kind of always will plan to be, minus the Keto Answers book. I don't really like treating my book writing with like deadlines and things like that. It's more about working on them every day until they're ready to go. Just kind of like a nice little side project that's a little bit therapeutic for me. So definitely yes.
All right. One final question.
All right. This is a big one, and maybe a question that is probably going to divide us pretty heavily. And
we're used to that in this political environment. Everybody has to take a side. So.
All right. So the question is LeBron or MJ? Who asked this? Somebody was just trying to make us fight.
Yeah, I don't know. But just in general, as a human, as a basketball player, Sorry, you broke up there. What was that?
I'm going to assume as a basketball player.
I'm going to have to decide. It's so tough. I mean, anyways, who's seen The Last Dance this year? It's like, it's phenomenal. The mindset, the competitive mindset of Michael Jordan is just insane.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the other side of the coin of LeBron having to like live up to the expectations of being as great as he is, and like the longevity that he's had throughout his career. is mind boggling.
Yep.
And like the supporting cast he's had compared to Jordan. I think that those two things to me, like this story is not finished here with LeBron. We could have another 3 championships. Who knows?
Got a long time left, I think, in that body.
Yeah. I mean, he's going to be like, statistically, he's going to be just, besides like the 6 for 6, I don't know how you could argue MJ or LeBron, but I know you have strong opinions and you have a clear bias of grew up, big fan growing up, and it was like sort of like hometown type of thing. So just understand that Chris's answer is wrapped up in an enormous amount of bias. I had no bias here. Grew up a Timberwolves fan, unfortunately. So
I haven't even heard my opinion. Maybe it's not that biased at all.
Yeah, okay, let's hear it.
I mean, I am a Chicago guy, so I always definitely, have a tendency to lean more towards MJ in this conversation. But the last few years of LeBron, it's actually very similar to what happened for me. Like, I'm a huge basketball guy. For anybody who doesn't know, like, basketball is like my first true passion. Love the NBA. What's happening with LeBron for me is very similar to what happened with Kobe. Like, I hated Kobe throughout his whole career. I was like, just didn't like him. Thought he was like arrogant. Thought he was, and also he was on the Lakers and they were always winning. But then like towards the end of his career, started having this like appreciation for his game and what he's done for the game and the longevity of his career and all those things. And that's definitely happening with LeBron right now. But I really don't think that like the comparison is, I don't think that you can compare the two because the eras are like, and I know that's a cop out for this, but like, I mean, you talk about the mindset and everything. Like Jordan grew up in an era where he had to have that. I think that like he had killer instincts. He was, I think, perceived as being tougher than LeBron, but he also grew up in a time where he had to be tougher. Like the 90s basketball was brutal. You couldn't go to the rim without getting like put on your ass. It was a tough thing. So like he had to adapt to those times. If LeBron grew up and played ball in the 90s, would he have had that same thing? Probably. I think he would have had to have adopted like that to thrive. And then you look at like LeBron obviously is like a physical freak of nature. I think his athletic abilities are crazy. I think he's probably more athletic than Jordan is. But also he grew up in a time where the access to equipment to better your athletic abilities was different than Jordan had. And maybe Jordan would have had those same things if he would have grown up during this time, and like, so I think that like the difference in the times just makes that such a hard conversation. I think that like right now, one of the things that's craziest is like you talk about LeBron's longevity of his career. Like, yeah, that guy has already played. I mean, he just finished his 17th year in the league. He's played like, I forget how many seasons of equivalent of postseason basketball career. So it's not just 17 seasons. It's like 17 seasons plus some. Like that's incredible. And something that Jordan obviously never did. He had a shorter career. He took time off during it, retired a couple times. But like also thinking about Jordan's numbers that he achieved with like taking a year off and all of those things is also pretty mind blowing. So with my biases, I'm still going to take MJ. I think we got to wait till LeBron's done. I think that there's a good chance by the end of LeBron's career that's answer from me might change though.
Do you think if LeBron goes another ring next year, it tips it? Do you think he has to match him with 6? Or do you think like a lot of these people are like, oh, well, it's just like he's lost some, so.
Yeah, I think that he lost some is bogus because of like you mentioned, his teammates. He's had some shitty teammates. I mean, when he was first with like the Cavaliers, like the best player they gave him was Antoine Jameson, like in an old Antoine Jameson. Like he had nobody on those teams. It was Drew Ilgauskas and stuff like that. So I don't really think that like you can really count those losses. I think the more championships he wins from like this one forward are going to be more defining for him because I think that the NBA is actually getting back to being harder nosed basketball. Like NBA from like, early 2000s up until like 2015, 16 was very weak basketball. The way that it was officiated was different. The way the players played was a lot different. And I feel like the last 2 years, basketball in the NBA, like the competitiveness has gone up a little bit. I feel like people are playing a little bit harder, a little bit tougher. So I think that like, and also looking at the shift that's happening, like Jordan didn't have Anthony Davises that existed. Like there was not 7-foot guards in the NBA when Jordan was playing. So and we're seeing a lot of that now, like, and there's even more coming up in like the youth basketball too. So the more championships LeBron wins from here on out, I think the better case will be made for his, kind of his throne as the greatest.
Yeah. This has been surprising to me also, like how he's changed his game over the years.
Yeah.
Whereas MJ was just sort of you got what you got for his entire career. That's been super impressive. Didn't he lead the league in assists this year?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Wild. Also, I would be curious. I mean, you talked about the mindset with Jordan. I wonder how he would have responded in a world having the stardom he had with social media and media, just generally the way it is right now. Because like that's one of the things that jumped out to me when watching Last Dance. Was like, man, this is a far simpler time.
Yeah,
I remember that. I was getting nostalgic. I mean, yeah, the world was an easier place.
Right.
Like, there was when you weren't on your phone, you were not distracted by anything. Period. There were no distractions. There was no chatter. It was like a couple news stations maybe said some stuff. Like you were a big star when you went places. But when we weren't those places, like that's just all it was. There wasn't people vying for your attention and talking shit to you constantly and having this expectation that you have this public persona and that, you know, even in the Last Dance, like we got some heat on MJ for was saying like Republicans wear shoes too, something like that. And like now it's expected that every single athlete needs to use their platform as a social activist, which is like, it's great that a lot of athletes are doing that, but just the social pressures now, it's like, would have MJ been able to have his edge in a world of incessant distraction we have right now? I don't know.
Right.
That would have been an interesting thing.
You know, it's actually a really interesting point because one of the things that MJ has been criticized a lot of outside of basketball has been like his lack of, up until recently, his lack of input on like social injustices and things like that. And I think it's because, like you said, he really grew up in a time where like it was just about basketball. And you could, when you watch the Last Dance documentary, you could really tell that like there was nothing else that mattered to him other than basketball. And now he's in a time where like people do expect you, if you have influence, to use that influence for these different things outside of whatever your core thing is, which he's actually stepped up to the plate. And I think he's done a better job at doing those things lately. But yeah, I mean, it's like, would he have been able to maintain that laser focus that he had? I think that like his mindset and his focus, which I think, everybody talks about the Mamba mentality with Kobe Bryant, like that was definitely born out of studying, Michael Jordan, having Michael Jordan as like a faux big brother to him, things like that. Would he have been able to carry that into now? Hard to say. Like you said, very, very different time, but like that guy's late, just hearing him talk about his time during that time, like he did not care about anything else. Like he was so locked into basketball. Like it was not about, there was no, side, like he has endorsements and stuff like that, but he wasn't, running side businesses or doing any of these things. Like the guy just wanted to win basketball games and that's all he cared about. Which I think was kind of a cool thing about basketball. Then like now you get all these guys that like, are maybe more interested in their Twitch video gaming streams than they are in like actually playing the game. And it's like, you kind of miss those simpler times a little bit.
Yep. So this episode is brought to you by HBO and The Last Dance. Okay. Yeah, I wish. All right.
We get a link to that in the show notes. I'm sure everybody's seen it.
Well, appreciate you. And thanks for joining me today. Maybe we can do some of these in person if you ever come back to Austin, and I will whoop your ass in the basketball court again.
Anybody who follows along on social media, I think, knows that's not true, but it's all right.
Thanks. Appreciate it. All right, Chris, chat soon, buddy.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Natural State Podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, I'd really appreciate you heading over to whatever service you're listening to this podcast on, dropping me a 5-star review and your thoughts on the show. This helps us get discovered by more people and spreading the good gospel of health. And if you want to stay plugged into all of my self-health experiments, recent research and books that I'm reading and my interpretations of those things, products that I'm testing and thoughts on all things related to health, check out my free weekly newsletter called The Feed. You can sign up for that at dranthonygustin.com/thefeed. That's dranthonygustin.com/thefeed. Thanks again for tuning in and your support of the Natural State Podcast.